All right, we're up and running.
Check 1 2 check.
All right, well.
Check 1 2 check.
Guys, welcome to the
nachos.
Dragon Ball Z panel. I am Peter Kelamis. I played Goku and Master Roshi, which not too many people know about. It's a little hidden secret. And
my name is Vic Mignogna, and I played.
Charlie?
Oh yeah, that's his name. I actually played two characters. I didn't know you played Roshi, and a lot of people don't know that I played Berter in the Ginyu Force. Berter! But Broly is the guy I've been playing for 20-some years, and I love him. He doesn't love me, but I love him.
He doesn't love anything.
Exactly.
My name is Chuck Huber. My first Dragon Ball Z role was Garlic Jr. and his henchman Mustard. After that, I played Android 17 and Kibito, Emperor Pilaf, Android 13, Master Shen, Mr. Shu, Invisible Guy, and a guy who had one line driving a truck, and he said, "Hey, paper clips!" That's all I said. I don't know what it was.
So basically everyone in Dragon Ball. Chuck is playing. Oh, and I sang the theme song for Dragon Ball Kai, for the series, for the TV series.
I didn't sing anything.
But he's going to right now.
They offered, I tried, and then they said, yeah, that wasn't a good idea. So, you know what, I think what we might do is just kind of open this up to questions. I'm sure you guys
Javi's got a mic.
Right here.
Alright guys, so I have the main house mic, so what we're going to do, right? No, I just talk this loud normally. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise our hands, and we're going to get ready to ask them some questions. Does anybody have any questions right now? There's one up here.
One up here. What was it like playing Android 17? I loved it. Okay.
To piggyback off of that, and a fairly common question, I think, what is your favorite line or lines that you delivered as your respective Dragon Ball characters?
Just recently with Super, Android 17 had a very powerful line, and it was sort of the arc of his character, him saying, "Look at me sacrificing himself. Look at me being all human." I love it. Also, Emperor Pilaf. That was one of my favorites.
Of the two characters I did, my favorite Master Roshi line was probably, "Hey, Goku!" which he did every single time. My favorite Goku line was, "That tub of lard was a good warm-up." Every time. I don't know why it makes me laugh.
My favorite line, I can sum up all of Broly's dialogue in one word, pretty much. Kakarot. Just yell Kakarot. That, I memorized that, by the way. We don't have to memorize our lines, but I memorized that. Kakarot.
Any other questions? Anybody? Raise your hand, anybody? So I'll ask.
Oh, we got a few
There's multiple questions.
And you said you can't beat me when I'm Super 17 for 18?
You can't beat me when I'm Super 17.
I want to hear him do it now. Bobby, hey, let him do it. I want to hear him do it.
See if you can take my part.
Do it.
You can't beat me when I'm Super 17.
I think I'm gonna kneecap you on the way out so you don't steal my job.
Okay, so this isn't a Dragon Ball question, but I know that you play Rohan from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Can you say "I refuse" to be your best Rohan voice?
I refuse!
Heaven's Door. I love Rohan. He was, that has such a, all of the JoJo stuff has such a unique look, the animation style. And every time I would see somebody cosplaying from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure at a convention, I'm like, what is this? What is this? And it was always that particular style. So when I got to play that role, I was really excited because I've always loved JoJo.
There's one behind you.
Okay, so this is for all three of y'all. In all of your years doing Dragon Ball, what has been your favorite scene, like, that your character was in? It can be sad, happy, whatever. Just what was your favorite to do?
I don't know if it was a favorite scene per se, but I look back sometimes at some of the quotes from some of the scripts, and they're shockingly inappropriate sometimes. You know, quotes like, "The ocean is so salty because people pee in it." Really? Things like that. There's always or fish pee in it. It was fish pee in it was the line.
They do.
Yes, so I don't know what the writers were thinking sometimes, and then they would hand this to us, and we're like, all right, this is going to be a panel question someday. So for me, it was some of the bizarre lines that would catch us off guard, because when we were starting, we were recording directly from the Japanese record, and a lot of times it didn't convey, like, you know, there's Goku with a beer, and we're like, this isn't going to fly over here. It's going to get changed to something else. Or, you know, Gohan running around naked, jumping out of, you know, a lake, and you're like, that's not going to work. So for me, it was the shocking stuff that we're not used to seeing in North American animation.
I absolutely love the scene in the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie a few years back. You know, I always loved playing Broly, but he was just so angry, and, you know, fought and yelled destruction all the time for 15 plus years.
Typecasting.
Pretty much. He was like this deep, right? And you didn't really know much about him or understand why he was so angry all the time. But then when the new movie came out, and it was kind of Toriyama's vision of the character, and there was more story, there was more background to why he was the way he was. And my favorite scene, and it's not a yelling scene, it's when he's telling the story about Ba, the big creature that he made friends with on the planet, and then his dad didn't like them being friends, and his dad shot the big creature's ear off, and Broly wears it around his waist, and he's like, I do remember when we were friends. Oh my gosh. I love that scene. When we finished recording, I'm like, can I do it again? And they're like, no, it was fine the first time. I'm like, yeah, but all the rest of it's yelling and fighting and killing, and I just want to do that really nice scene one more time.
I really enjoyed in Dragon Ball Super getting to finally, after 25 years, act with Goku. So when Goku and Android 17 are together, I really think it was like Laurel and Hardy. It was like old school vaudeville. Because, like, you know, just Goku's such a dork, and Android 17 was just not having any of it. I also like Android 13 saying, "Don't you lecture me with your $30 haircut." Which I'm thinking, you know, because back then when we recorded that, that was an expensive haircut. And now it's kind of a cheap haircut. So I think they need to re-record that and say, "Don't you lecture me with your $100 haircut."
They gotta keep the sling blade in there, though, I think.
Yeah. I'm thinking for my TikTok, I'm thinking of just going up to people with interesting haircuts and just filming myself saying, "Don't you lecture me with you," you know, right next to somebody with a beard.
Any other questions? Anyone?
Well, I guess as long as we're on the topic of $30 haircuts, are you aware of a website that just plays that soundbite and then people can just play whatever other silly sounds?
There's a whole website dedicated?
Yeah, it starts out with, "Don't you lecture me with that $30 haircut," and then people can just put their own little silly sound effects.
I've got, what's it called? What's the website name?
I think if you look up "Don't you lecture me with that $30 haircut," that should be it.
Pop up? Okay.
Yeah, one second.
Don't you lecture me with your $30haircut.com.
What are, like, in the studio, what are your most embarrassing moments trying to record Dragon Ball? Or any anime?
Well, I don't have one for Dragon Ball, but when I was doing a show called Shin-Chan,
Oh my god, I was going to ask you a question about
I was Hiro Nohara in Shin-Chan, and he came home from work one day, and he was taking off his suit and tie, and they turned on, like, striptease music, and he had to be like, "Ooh, baby, for heroes," and I was embarrassed doing it, And Zach and Peter like locked me in the booth and would play it over and over again, bringing new people in to watch me be mortified about me trying to be sexy, because I'm not sexy as a thing. I do like, oh, you're kind of like my uncle. So they were making fun of me trying to be sexy.
For me, this didn't happen to me, but I can't top the story. It happened to an actor by the name of Gary Chalk, who's a very gifted actor, voice actor. He was one of the original Optimus Primes and Transformers, and there's a story where he was in studio once, and it wasn't a Transformers record. I think it was a My Little Pony or something. It was something pretty innocuous and friendly, and they needed somebody to burp, and the character who needed to burp, she couldn't just burp naturally, and Gary's like, I'll do it. And then Gary fires out this burp, and it continues into vomit. And then so he threw up on his lines, and I think they had to clear the studio for a few minutes. And you never heard that story from me.
There was Colleen Klingenbeard one time. She used to tell the story about she got really into one of the characters she was doing, and you know they have a pop screen in front of the microphone, which catches all the snot and spit. She was like, ah, and then she accidentally licked the pop screen.
Oh my gosh.
Which is gross. Why are we vomiting and licking pop screens? What's going on?
I don't
Save
know.
us, Vic, save us.
I will never be able to save you from that. I'm sorry. I don't really have any embarrassing. The only embarrassing thing about playing Broly is that I don't have the same kind of resilient scream all day and no problem. You know what I mean? Like, next day you're fine. No, I scream all day and I sound like this for the next week. And that's what happened with the first Broly movie. They brought me in to do the very first movie 8, Legendary Super Saiyan, and I let it rip. I mean, I had no idea what I was in for. So right out of the gate, I'm going for it, full on. And 2 hours in, I couldn't make a sound. And we were only halfway through the movie. And I was really kind of embarrassed. So they said, look, I was living in Houston at the time, and I'd come up to Dallas to record it. And they said, well, go home and shut up, drink a lot of water, don't talk, and come back next week, and we'll finish the movie. So that was the first time that I just completely thrashed my voice and didn't even finish the character. And when the movie was over, I was like, oh, thank God, I made it through the movie. I don't have to do him anymore. But, he continued to show up, and I loved playing the character. That's what I meant by, I love him, but he doesn't love me. Questions?
When you're taking an anime that's already been voiced in a different place, and you're lending your voice to dubbing it over, what is the difference between that versus taking an anime that this is the first time you are voicing it, and like trying to come up with a voice for it? You know what I mean?
So the two things you're describing are, one is called prelay, which is when you're doing the voices first, which is traditionally how it's done when a new series is being created. And then they'll send the voice footage over, a lot of times overseas, and they will match it to the animation, and then boom, you have a cartoon. The ADR, which is a lot of what the anime stuff is, it's been recorded overseas or by somebody else, and you have to match the voice flaps to the dialogue. And a lot of times it doesn't match up. And we were recording from the Japanese, and the voice flaps would be this, and the line was, okay! And then you had to make okay fit into all of that, and then you're like, I can only slow this down so much. Like, okay.
What I mean, seriously, is what I was trying to say was, like, I really think maybe it's just, kind of okay.
Yeah. Or a lot of times it will change line, but those are the two differentiating things between the different recording styles. It's much more fun to do prelay because you get to have a little bit of leeway as to how you want to do the lines, how you want to do the characters. ADR is very specific, and it's a skill that is kind of annoying to learn because there's like 3 beeps that come in. They play the scene, and then they have your line, and then they do the, and after the 3rd beep, you start your line, and you have to match it. And a lot of times it's annoying. You got to do it a lot.
prelay, like you said, is a lot more flexible. Imagine, like you can perform the line however you want, and then the animators have to match your performance. But one of the more difficult things I would even say about dubbing is that the animation is already completed. And it's a lot harder to give a believable, authentic, natural sounding performance when you have to match a very strict, confined set of flaps. Oh, there's like a weird pause right in the middle of your sentence. Like, how do you make that work and feel still like it's natural? Part of your question, I think, was about coming up with a voice, right? There are three different contributing factors, I would say, to the voice that you ultimately end up with in an anime. Number one would be, first influence, would be the original Japanese. Not always. Sometimes the Japanese companies want the character to sound very much like theirs, and sometimes they don't really care. The second factor would be the director, his vision for the character and how he sees the character. And then the third would obviously be the actor. So the actor will bring in some ideas, the director will have his ideas. It may or may not have to have some element of the original Japanese actor. In fact, some animes, the bigger animes, like Bleach, Naruto, Full Metal, the companies in Japan wanted to have a say in the casting. Sometimes they'll just hand an anime off to an English company and like, have at it, do whatever you want, cast whoever you want. But some of those larger shows, they really are extra concerned about how they're presented in another language. And so the Japanese companies like, send us the auditions, like we want to help, we want to contribute and have a say in the character, in the person you choose, in the voice you choose. Like with Full Metal, the woman that played Edward Elric, amazing, Romy Park, but when they dubbed it into English, the Japanese wanted it to be a male in English. Thank heavens. But it's just one of those things where there are several different factors in determining what voice ultimately you end up with.
Yeah, the ADR, I always say that it is the most creative, most fun data entry you've ever done in your life. Because it is very, very specific, and you have to be very, very, like it is that difficulty of trying to make this feel natural. And there are actors, stellar actors in the DFW area who early in the days came into Funimation, and the process was so frustrating and so anti what they're used to from a creative impulse as an actor that they just couldn't do it. They were like, they probably could have, but they didn't want to. It goes opposite to sort of your natural instincts. But there was one time at Funimation, there was a movie called Dragon Age, Legend of the Seeker. I played Frennic, the dragon. And it was a prelay we did at Funimation, and so after like 15 years of nothing but ADR, suddenly they were like, you've been cast in this thing and we're going to do a table read of the script. There's going to be cameras on your faces and we're going to record group scenes together. And so after like 15 years of working with people, we're suddenly around the table doing a script reading. And it was like Eric Vale and Chris Sabat and John, like all the big Colleen, everybody was there, and it was like so strange to be suddenly doing like what I'm used to with either like episodic or theatrical stuff. So we did it once, we loved it, we never did it again. I don't know why.
Any other questions?
Okay, so what came first? Voice acting or your love of anime?
I'm sorry,
She asked, what came first, your love of acting, or what, your love of anime, or voice acting?
Anime or voice acting?
Yeah, what got you into
I mean, I started in doing stand-up comedy, so I used to do a ton of characters in my stand-up, so that's kind of where my range, I guess, got developed without really thinking about it, imitating other people. So that kind of led to voice commercials and then animation. And in the beginning, I think in the beginning of your voice career, there's more chance of you getting like ADR work than prelay work. It's a little harder to land the prelay series. So that's where I started. But I'd say the pre-lay stuff is a lot more fun. Like we were saying, you have the latitude to create a character. And for me, it's like, when they hand you the character for the first time, most of the time they have a sketch of the character. And for me, it's kind of instant where I'll decide, okay, that's what I think this character sounds like. They always give you a written description too. For me, the visual is the most important thing. Like, that's what this character is going to sound like, in my opinion. And also, if the character's 10 feet tall and 800 pounds, like, I'm probably not the guy. There's people with like deep baritone voices that will nail it and it will sound the way it looks. So I think I'm probably.
But did you love anime? Were you an anime fan before you voiced
I was a
anime?
cartoon fan. I grew up in an era where there wasn't a ton of anime on TV. It kind of exploded kind of in the mid to late 90s, I'd say, around that time, and I kind of got into it when I was working in it. So I wasn't exposed to it a lot as a kid. It was just, we'd wake up Saturday morning and watch whatever cartoon they gave us. That was it.
I got into voice acting because I love acting. Voice acting was just another opportunity to act, right? With just a different set of tools. I'd always loved acting and theater and on camera and stuff since I was very young. And a friend of mine in Houston, 20-some years ago, said, hey, you should go and audition for this place. They're looking for actors. And that was all I needed to hear. I didn't know if they paid you. I didn't care. I just loved acting. So I went and auditioned, and that's how I got into voice acting. And as far as anime is concerned, I loved Speed Racer when I was a little boy, and I had no idea that it was anime. I mean, I was a little kid. And all I knew was it didn't look like Bugs Bunny. It didn't sound like Scooby-Doo. It was weird and different in its own unique way, and I loved it. My friend and I used to run around when we were kids imitating Speed Racer and Pops Racer and Chim Chim and Spritle and all of them, and had no clue that so many years later I would actually get to be a part of anime voice acting as well. But it was basically a love of acting that led to voice acting.
We delineated between the funny cartoons and the cartoons that were serious and had stories. So we didn't know that it was anime. Battleship Yamamoto, G-Force, Speed Racer, of course. And then I got into college, and we had like a super cool video store in Chicago, and it had one wall with anime, like Cowboy Bebop and Akira, and like a whole bunch of really cool ones. And we would try to watch anime series, but you'd finally get the episode 1 through 4, and you'd watch the first 4 episodes, and then it'd be months and months and months before you'd end up at the store when 5 through 8 were there. So we became frustrated with series in college, and we just started watching all the standalone films. So Akira was the first one that blew my mind, and I was like, I didn't realize art could do this. This is amazing. But still, I was in school for acting. Never even conceived that there were actors doing the voices. I was focused on TV, film, and theater. And then I was in a theater company, and a buddy came in and he was like, hey, you should go audition for this Dragon Balls thing. And I was like, Dragon Balls? That sounds weird. And he was like, it's Japanese anime. And I'm like, okay, so it's definitely weird. And I went and auditioned, and Funimation was so rinky-dink back then. I was like, this isn't real. There wasn't a receptionist. It was kind of like this scruffy dude, smelled like smoke. He was like, hey man, yeah, come on in here and let's audition. Sabbath. And it wasn't really professional at the beginning. They kind of put like audition notices in the back of Guns and Ammo. I mean, it wasn't really, they weren't looking the traditional route for actors. I mean, Sean Schimmel was a professional French horn player when he got Goku. So, I wasn't even sure it was going to pay me and then I got the check, and I was like, okay, I'll do this all day long, man. This is great. But it wasn't the type of anime, Dragon Ball Z wasn't the type of anime I was used to. I was used to sort of more fantastical, story-driven stuff. So I didn't even notice it was anime when I started watching, or when I started recording. But then, of course, it blew up and everything blew up. And then it blew up again, and then COVID happened, and it blew up again. So it's been very good to us.
The other ones?
How does it feel, especially with these very popular characters with Super and some of the movies and things, and coming back to a character that you haven't done or thought about in a long time? How do you reapproach kind of stepping back into that role?
Probably the first time that happened was with the Dragon Ball movies, and they asked me to come back in for Emperor Pilaf, and I was like, what? Because I hadn't done Pilaf in years, and I was like, are you serious? I get to do Emperor Pilaf again? And they were like, yeah, and they had a little recording of him for me to listen to a little reference line. And I was like, oh, yeah. And I was like, that's incredible. I was like, that's amazing. Are we going to do this again? They're like, yeah, it's coming. I was like, oh, that's amazing. And then when I got to do Android 17 again, I mean, mind blown. I mean, still mind blown that a character that I joked for years, because he was such a shark, such an evil shark in DBZ. And then sort of at the end, he's like, you know, taking care of the poachers, and like that's the last little glimpse you get of him. And then for years, I said he was going to come back as a tree-hugging hippie. I said that for years and years and years. And then he did. And I was like, I did that with my mind.
I mentioned a little bit ago about the original Broly and how much I enjoyed it, but it just was very taxing on the voice and not much depth to the character. And then when I found out that there was a new Dragon Ball Super Broly movie coming and that he was going to be canon, one of the people at Funimation, Justin Cook, called me and told me about it, and he said the good news is that it's a different Broly. Like, it's not the original, so you're not necessarily stuck doing that really low, that kind of stuff, you know, for 6 hours, you know? And you don't have to push your voice as hard. And so when I started recording it, it was a lot more fun, because when he was speaking, he was very quiet. The sad part was that there were only about 20 lines like that, and then there were 500 screaming, fighting lines. But it was really fun to come back to the character, especially because the character had morphed a little bit and a little deeper, not so yelly, screaming all the time.
Any questions, anyone?
So thinking of any character from any type of media, books, movies, TV shows, could have been done, could have been not done. What character would you love to play? If you could pick any character in any media, what would you love to play?
For me, I kind of had it come true a little bit, because I got to play Yoda in Lego Star Wars. And I remember auditioning, because I'm such a huge Star Wars fan anyway. And then realizing I got the gig. And this was before Lucas had sold the franchise to Disney. So it was like, I remember, working and then getting a check from LucasArts. And it was like, I don't even want to cash this. And then I saw the amount and I'm like, I'm going to cash this.
I'll take a picture of it.
I could die tomorrow, and I have already had the chance to play my favorite, my dream, Captain Kirk from Star Trek, the original series. When I was a little boy, I ate, slept, and breathed that show. And then fast forward 4 decades, I got a bunch of friends together. We rebuilt the entire sound stage from the original series and created 11 full-length episodes that finishes the 5-year mission of the Enterprise and perfectly brings closure and resolution to the original series. And my childhood hero, my parents divorced when I was 9, and my dad wasn't around, and there was this guy who was the captain of this ship, and he had these friends, and they would go on adventures together, and he was, you know, and he was this awesome character. And so when I created this series, Star Trek Continues, I decided, you know, I would get to fulfill my childhood dream of playing Captain Kirk. And so check it out, by the way, shameless plug. StarTrekContinues.com. We have 15 million plus views, and this guy right here is the most amazing Dr. McCoy you'll ever see.
And I remember when he asked me, I was like, what are we doing in your mom's basement with cardboard sets? What? And then he'd call me like a couple weeks. I was like, yes, of course, I'll do whatever you ask me to do. I'm there for you, bro. Because Vic, you know, he did one of my early movies, and so when you do that, you work for your friends, and you love working for your friends because you want to support them. But then he'd call me every I don't know, like every 6 weeks with new news about the series. He's like, Chuck, you're never gonna believe it. We got Grant Imahara to play Sulu. And I was like, what? And then he'd be like, Chris Doohan, son of James Doohan, is gonna play our Scotty. And I was like, I thought we were in your mom's basement. What's going on? And then we'd have these big guest stars coming in, Lou Ferrigno, just all the John Delancey. I got to do a scene with Q, and I was a huge Next Gen fan. So it's still a highlight of my entire career. It's one of the top 3 things I've ever done in my life, for sure. But if I got to do any character that I wanted to do, I'm currently writing a play for him. He's also in a limited series that my producing partner is shopping right now. But I would like to play Nikola Tesla, but in a way that the CIA would be angry at. You know, to show his real power and not the whitewashed historical accounting. Because I believe he's a dimensional traveler. He probably could shoot sparks out his fingers.
Anyone else? Make sure you raise your hand for new questions.
Hey guys.
Don't you lecture me with your $30 haircut.
It's a full metal question. Yes.
Joseph and Joseph.
Yes. Maybe forget. All right. Full metal question. The Sewing Life Alchemist. What was y'all's initial reaction when y'all read that script about the him sacrificing his daughter to make a chimera of the dog? Like, what was y'all's initial reaction?
I believe my reaction was this. I went, yeah. And then I watched the series and I was like, I'm a horrible monster. I mean, I thought it was, you know, you love, if you're going to play a bad guy, you want him to be incredibly bad. And there is, I don't think there's anything worse than what he did, because he did something that had not really been done. I can't find another example of it where a father ruins the family dog and his daughter, but doesn't kill them, he just combines them and they're tortured like that. And he does it for reasons that he really truly believes in, and it's just the most, and I think a lot of what happened was parents were letting kids watch anime, and Full Metal came along, and they're like, you can watch it, sure, not realizing that it was going to scar their souls. And so I still have people come up to the table and they're still scarred by it. You know, they're pretend angry at me. Just on TikTok the other day, somebody asked, were you in Full Metal Alchemist? So I put a wig on my pug. And I'm like, oh, Nina, you're such a cute. And I gotta say, it's pretty horrifying with the dog from the series, but with the pug, even worse.
That scene in that episode was the moment that I realized that Full Metal was not the typical anime. Honestly. We had just started, and of course the first episode was fun, out in the desert with Father Cornello and Lior, and you know, a lot of short jokes and pipsqueak midget stuff and everything. And then that came along with Tucker and Nina and Alexander, the dog. I'm like, oh, what a sweet show. Oh my, ah! The moment it happened, I was like, this show just took a serious turn. And from that moment on, I took the whole series much more seriously because anyone that was willing to do something like that in the show, like, this is going to be a great show.
Anyone? Okay.
Favorite villain?
Favorite villain?
Favorite villain in anything or like animation?
Dragon Ball villain. Who's your favorite Dragon Ball villain?
Dragon Ball villain. Oh. Well, I mean, I would face off with Brian Drummond a lot, just with Vegeta. And it's like we would have battles that, not just on camera, but I mean, in the script, we would be fighting for weeks. And literally, it would be like, ah! And then the episode would end, and then it would be like 2 weeks till the next record, and we're like, oh, where were we last time? These battles seem to go on for months in the studio. So for me, that was the most fun villain, if you want to call him that I would go up against.
I would say Broly is my favorite villain, but I don't think he's a villain. I think he's a hero. He's definitely the hero of the series. Don't you agree? Don't you agree? And my favorite Dragon Ball joke is, how many Dragon Ball characters does it take to screw in a light bulb? It only takes 2, but it takes 38 episodes.
My favorite villain to play, to record, is Emperor Pilaf. He's the worst villain. He's not really a villain. He's just a comedic relief. But Android 17, when he came down in DBZ originally, I was like, this guy is bad to the bone. Like, he was just such a shark. And he's still my favorite villain in the series.
Anyone else? Anybody?
When y'all are voice acting, and like I hear when y'all are just naturally doing your voices that y'all do almost all of that command. But when it involves like eating or fighting, y'all have to are y'all also eating at the same time, or at least play fighting?
For the eating, I think it can go a couple of ways. If you can, sometimes you're just doing eating. And then other times, I know Vic was telling a story the other day about, you can get into it getting donuts in your mouth. And sometimes you put, I remember I was doing a scene where you had to, I think I had a wired jaw, so then I just took a pencil and bit down on it so I couldn't move my teeth. I mean, you're talking like this, seriously? So you can mimic it a number of different ways.
Yeah, yesterday when we were having a panel, I was talking about, there was a scene in Full Metal Alchemist where Ed got punched in the face, and his face swelled up really bad. And as soon as I saw it, the moment I saw it, first frame, I'm like, his voice would sound different. So I asked the director if I could run to the vending machine room and find something to put in my mouth. And the perfect thing were those little powdered sugar donuts. Package of 6, perfect. So I ran back to the studio, I'm so excited. They fit perfect size, right in the cheek, and it kind of gave you that kind of a puffy sound when you talk. But what I didn't look into at all was how long he was going to have a puffy face. And it turned out to be most of the episode. And I didn't want to eat all the donuts because I needed them for the effect. And we had already recorded a couple of lines, so now we had established the sound. So once the first donut started falling apart in my mouth, I would spit it out, put another donut in, and I was like, I have to pace myself because I only have 6 donuts here. So fortunately we finished it, but that was always a fun thing, is to put food or something in your mouth to simulate a particular sound. Some of us aren't as talented as he.
The fight reactions are one of the things that are difficult for actors to do. I teach online voice acting classes, and we go over fight reactions. And it's really fairly simple. It just takes a lot of abdominal strength, and you can't really do the fighting moves, but you kind of imitate it in your core. Like you imitate where you, like you really have to kind of feel where it hits or where it hurts. And then also have good mic discipline so that you're keeping your face towards the microphone. And I think all of us, at some point or another, have knocked a $3,000 microphone because you get into it and you knock it over.
I wish I was there like the first day that Marlon Brando showed up on the Godfather set with the cotton in his mouth. Because he literally put cotton in his mouth when he did Don Corleone. He shows up. Damn, I got it, let it. And the other actors must have been just looking at it going, what the hell is he doing? Is there cotton in his mouth?
Brando.
Yeah, there's cotton in my mouth. And it's a very bizarre choice, but I guess whatever works.
We have time for about 2 more questions. Anyone that hasn't asked a question yet? Anyone else?
In the interest of maybe people who want to get into voice acting themselves, since I've done some, but I haven't done it in a while, what do you recommend for people either getting back into voice acting or wanting to start pursuing the craft themselves?
Well, I would say Masterclass 1.0, Chuck Huber, is the best way to get.
I think the very first step is if you buy a USB microphone for your computer. These items used to be thousands and thousands of dollars, and they're really inexpensive, and the quality can be quite amazing. For a relative, for like $300, you can go to B&H Audio online and get a whole set with an interface box, a stand, everything you would possibly need to sound decent. And hear yourself for the first time, because it's kind of like in the olden days when you would hear your voice on your answering machine, you're like, I don't sound like that, do I? It sounds stupid. You got to hear yourself, and you got to manipulate your own voice, and you got to know where the parameters of what you can do are. That's like step one is getting used to your own voice.
I took Masterclass 101 with Chuck Huber.
I'm
going to be a voice acting legend.
Best student ever.
Yeah, you know what he said? I wanted to just springboard off something that Peter said. You guys are so lucky to live in the era you live, because for many, many decades, you needed a recording studio and all kinds of fancy, expensive equipment, and now it's at your fingertips. It's it's really amazing. What I would say though, a couple of things that you need. Number one, don't pigeonhole yourself into voice acting. Almost every actor I know, and I'm pretty sure I can say this for all three of us, we were actors first, and still are. The key to voice acting is not voice, it's acting. That's the operative word. And most of the voice actors that you know that have been around for a while started out as actors, and maybe even some of them have degrees in theater and acting and have done tons of on-camera work or stage work. So look for any opportunity to develop your skills as an actor. Not a voice actor, an actor. Because a voice actor is basically just acting in front of a microphone, right? The second thing I would say is that you have to have a thick skin, and you have to be determined. If you're somebody who gives up easily, if you're somebody who's like, this is stupid, I auditioned 3 times and I didn't get anything, it may take 30 times,
300.
Yeah, so you have to be tenacious. You have to decide, this is something I really care about. I'm not going to get discouraged easily. I'm just going to keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing. And that's when the opportunities come. It's not, it's not for the faint of heart. There are a lot of careers in the world that if you go to school, you get the training, you get the job. It's a simple equation. Whenever you start talking about creative fields, acting, singing, dancing, drawing, painting, almost any creative field, there are thousands of people out there that want to do it, And it doesn't matter if you have a degree in it. It doesn't matter, none of that matters. It just matters if you're good for the role, if you fit the role, or if you can carry out the role. So any creative field, you really need to have a lot of determination. Don't get discouraged easily, just stick with it.
I would, one of the things I offer to students of mine after they're finished with my class is that they should get into a live class, a live acting class. There's a difference between reading a script, like psychologically, physiologically, there's a difference of what happens in your brain when you act from a memorized text or improv, as opposed to when you're reading. When you're reading, your brain looks like it's reading. The really good voice actors are able to make it so that it looks like it's acting, like it's feeling. But when you memorize something or you're acting in an improv class, your brain lights up like a character. It teaches you something different about acting. So I always tell people to get improv class, especially. To me, that's the quickest way to build your acting skills, because you get plenty of time up on stage doing the job. And that's what you need to do. Just get up and do more acting.
Anyone who hasn't asked a question yet? Anyone? One more question? One more? All right, anybody who has asked a question, get one more question? Anybody?
Hi, it's me again. Sorry for interrupting. How do you feel either reading through a script or recording video games or various other things, having a conversation with yourself? How's that usually approached, or how does that feel?
I think I've only had a couple of lines with myself. It's usually fun. You know, actors are a little narcissistic. You're like, this is all me.
I had a situation once. I got to play Venom in Absolute Carnage, and it was they called it a picture. Was it a picture book where it was animated, but it was only like a few frames. It was almost like you're flipping through a comic book. You can find it online. But I was playing Carnage, but there was also Cletus, and there was also Venom. So when we got the scripts, it was so insanely confusing that even the producers had to take a moment to figure out exactly which voice we were doing. Even though we were playing a certain character, they were possessed by Venom, so it was insanely confusing. It's almost like we were playing 2 or 3 different characters with the single voice, so it can get very confusing.
I did a show years ago called Vampire Night, and the character that I played was Zero, but he had a twin brother. In fact, when the producers called me and said, you're going to be playing Zero and Ichiru, my first response was, woohoo! I'm playing Zero! Who's Ichiru? I had no idea he had a twin brother, and the same actor in Japan played both roles. So the way that we approached it, because they had a lot of interaction, and they have the same voice, but they have a different personality. So it's not about changing your voice, it's about the personality involved. We would record all of Zero's lines, take a little 5-minute break, and then go back and record all of each of his lines. So you could just get in a different mindset of this guy now, and you would hear the lines already recorded and respond to them as the other character. It was a lot of fun,
As that wraps up this panel, before we leave, guys, where can they follow you on Instagram, Facebook, website, any places they can follow you guys?
For me, it's just at Peter Kelamis, lowercase, both on Instagram and on Twitter.
At Vic Mignogna on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, but I haven't really used it much. So, and StarTrekContinues.com, or our Facebook page is, I think, official Star Trek Continues. Check that out. You'll see a lot of familiar faces there.
ChuckHuber.org is my website, and I'm Android Huber on TikTok.
That being said, guys, let's give
Thank
them a
you,
round of
guys.
applause.
Thank you very much, guys.